blonde hair looped around my shower drain like a golden accusation, and the calm life I'd stitched together at 68 split down the seam. I held that shining filament up to the light and felt time bend every promise, every Tuesday golf game, every quiet dinner rearranging into a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Interesting, I whispered to no one, and somewhere inside me, a door I thought was long rusted shut swung open with a soft, decisive click. I'm Margaret Walsh, 68, a widow for 16 years who told herself she didn't need fireworks, just someone to share the crossword at 7 a.m., a pot roast at 6 p.m., and the kind of gentle silence you grow into like a well-worn sweater. Frank Garrett walked into my life 3 years ago at the Senior Center's book club corduroy jacket. Patient smile, a laugh that came from deep in the chest. "Shall we share the end seat?" he asked, and I, who had been standing for so long, said, "Yes, let's." We built a routine from small, sturdy things, Sunday crosswords, his habit of humming off-key in the shower, the way he always brought whole wheat bread because he swore it kept a man honest. I believed him. At my age, belief is not naivete, it's an act of hope. That Tuesday began like all the others. He kissed my cheek at 6:30 a.m., mumbled something about meeting the boys for an early tea time, and promised to pick up orange juice on the drive back. I hummed Sinatra while wiping the bathroom mirror, the kind of domestic music that means peace. And then the drain gurgled its complaint. Sleeves up, fingers in, habit, soap scum, a little of my own stubborn silver, and then summer wheat. Not mine, not Patricia's, either. She'd been a brunette until the day she died. This wasn't memory clinging to the pipe. This was a postcard from the present. I wrapped the hair in tissue, slid it into my jewelry box beside the wedding band I'd kept after Robert's funeral, and an old ache tightened like a corset I'd sworn never to wear again. "A woman who deceives," I murmured as I penciled in letters on my crossword that evening before Frank came back. And when he finally breezed in at 2:15 p.m., whistling and depositing groceries on my counter, he said, "Terrible round. I think I need new glasses." And I replied, "Maybe you need new friends," my pen hovering over 7 across, my smile the kind a woman learns after she's buried a husband, and the last illusions she had about fairness. Dinner sharpened my hearing. He cut his steak with surgical care and said, almost too casually, "Ran into Dorothy at the store, looked a bit tired." Dorothy Stevens, my friend of 40 years, the redhead who swore her Irish curls were her inheritance and never once chased fashion when grief came for her marriage. "She deserves some happiness," I said. And the way Frank answered, "She's a good woman," carried that soft, dangerous warmth men get when they decide to be saviors. I brewed tea at 9 p.m. and scrolled through Dorothy's posts for the first time in years. Candle-lit dinners at a place Romanos wouldn't seat you without a reservation. A caption that read, "Sometimes life surprises you in the best ways." And then, a week later, new haircut and color feeling 20 years younger. The hair gleamed in loose waves, expensive, deliberate, and exactly the shade of the strand in my jewelry box. I called her the next morning with the voice women use when they bring casseroles and bandages. "Lunch?" I asked. She chose the quaint cafe with the checkered tablecloths where secrets always seem to shiver themselves free. She arrived 10 minutes late, breathless, a fresh halo of blonde catching noon sun in the window. Touch-up ran over. She laughed too quickly, fingers fluttering to her hair like it needed protection. I told her she looked luminous because she did and watched her flinch at kindness the way the guilty do. When I mentioned Frank's precise Tuesday's golf, groceries, home by 2:30 p.m., never a minute off her cup rattled against its saucer. "Routine's good," she said, and tried to smile like the old Dorothy who once held my hand in a hospital corridor and said, "You breathe, I'll pace." I leaned in until the roses on the tablecloth blurred. "He noticed your hair," I murmured, and her face tightened at the edges. She left with a headache she invented at 1:10 p.m., and I watched her hurry down the sidewalk, that new blonde bright as a siren. On my walk home, I made a list the way women make lists when they plan holidays and funerals. What I would ask, what I would not beg for, what I would no longer ignore. By the time I turned my key at 2 p.m., the resolve felt like iron under my ribs. I set the kettle, opened my bathroom cabinet, and stared at the polite army of bottles on the shelf. Revenge at my age. I thought, should be measured, elegant and educational. The first move would be small, quiet, and impossible to ignore. I woke early Friday, the kind of crisp autumn morning that smells faintly of endings. The light through my curtains was soft, forgiving, the way the universe always seems before it decides to hand you a test. Frank was still in bed, breathing steady, his silver hair mussed on the pillow like a man who didn't have a care in the world. I watched him for a moment, this man who had walked into my life promising warmth and routine, and wondered how long it takes for a lie to look like love. At 7:30 a.m., he stirred, kissed my cheek, and said he'd be helping his nephew move furniture that day. His excuses always sounded reasonable. Predictable men make predictable mistakes. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, I grabbed my purse and headed to the drugstore. I moved through the aisles with purpose, my heart calm but alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Toothpaste, cotton pads. Then finally, the beauty section, where transformation is sold in bottles. There it was, hair removal cream, industrial strength, for coarse and stubborn hair. I turned the box over in my hands, reading warnings about sensitivity, about leaving it on too long. Perfect, I thought, because betrayal left on too long burns. Back home, I stood in Frank's bathroom, studying his precious shampoo, the one that cost $28 and smelled like cedar and false promises. I unscrewed the cap, poured the golden liquid down the drain, and replaced it with the cream, its sharp chemical scent hidden beneath the few drops of shampoo I added back for authenticity. Then I placed it exactly where it had been. My hands didn't shake. Vengeance, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums Sinatra. That evening, Frank came home cheerful, smelling of beer and camaraderie. Nephew's heavier than he looks. He chuckled, rubbing his back. I smiled, kissed his cheek, and said I'd made his favorite casserole, over dinner. I mentioned that Dorothy had invited us both to brunch Sunday morning. She said she has exciting news to share. I added, watching his fork pause midway to his mouth. Both of us, he asked, eyes flicking up. Both, I confirmed, and his hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. She said it was important you be there. He nodded too quickly. That's nice of her, he said, but the line between his brows betrayed him. Saturday morning, the performance began. Frank showered first, humming off key while I sat in the kitchen, pretending to do the crossword. He emerged looking perfectly normal. The cream would need time, patience. Margaret, I told myself, the best revenge ripens slowly. That evening, he showered again, unusual for him on weekends, and I heard him muttering from the bathroom. When he came out 20 minutes later, towel wrapped around his waist, he looked puzzled. Everything all right? I asked casually, glancing over the newspaper. My hair feels strange, he said, running his hand through it. Softer, thinner, maybe. I gave a small, sympathetic smile. Maybe it's that expensive shampoo finally working its magic. He nodded uncertainly and spent the rest of the evening checking his reflection in every reflective surface, like a man watching himself fade. By 8 a.m. Sunday morning, I woke to his panicked voice echoing from the bathroom. Margaret, something's wrong with my hair. I slipped into my robe, walking slowly, because control is the only real luxury after heartbreak. Frank stood in front of the mirror, his silver hair patchy and uneven. Tufts clung to his fingers. Oh my, I said softly, touching his shoulder. That is concerning. His reflection was pale, eyes wide. I don't understand. It's like it just melted. I folded my arms gently. Maybe you should see a doctor. Though I did read somewhere that guilt can cause sudden hair loss. His head whipped around. Guilt? What guilt? Just a theory, I murmured, adjusting his collar with care. Now, About Dorothy's brunch, should we cancel? No, he said too quickly. We can't disappoint her. Of course, I replied, hiding my smile. You wouldn't want to. 15 minutes later, Frank emerged wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his forehead. He looked like a boy pretending not to be in trouble. I touched his arm, my voice honey-sweet. You look fine, dear. Dorothy will understand. He nodded. Unaware that the next act of this little play was about to begin, as we drove toward Dorothy's house, the silence between us hummed louder than the car engine. I hummed an old tune and thought, almost fondly, that for a man who prided himself on control, Frank was finally about to learn what it felt like to lose it completely. Dorothy's house sat at the end of a quiet lane, framed by a garden that looked like a watercolor painting, roses and chrysanthemums tangled in perfect chaos. The morning sun made her windows glow, the same golden light that used to make our shared memories feel soft and safe. But that day, as I stepped from the car, it just made everything sharper. Frank tugged nervously at his baseball cap, checking his reflection in the side mirror for the 5th time. You look fine, I said, my voice smooth as glass. He nodded, though the panic in his eyes betrayed him. Dorothy opened the door before we could knock, her floral dress fluttering at her knees, that new blonde hair gleaming in the sunlight. Margaret Frank, she greeted, her voice bright but too high-pitched, too rehearsed. She hugged me quickly, then hesitated before giving Frank a brief, awkward embrace. I'm so glad you both came. We wouldn't miss it, I said, stepping inside. The house smelled of cinnamon rolls and freshly cut flowers, the kind of warmth Dorothy was known for. But beneath it, I caught something else. Tension, guilt, maybe. Something unspoken curling through the air like invisible smoke. Frank followed, stiff and uncomfortable, adjusting his cap every few steps. You mentioned exciting news, I said as Dorothy led us into her dining room. She smiled, but it faltered at the edges. Yes. Well, coffee first. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured, the porcelain cups clinking against their saucers. Frank reached up, perhaps out of habit, and removed his cap. I watched Dorothy freeze mid-pour. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. Frank, she said softly, are you feeling all right? Frank's hand flew to his head, panic flickering across his face. I'm fine, he said quickly, fumbling to put the cap back on. Just trying a new shampoo. The words sounded ridiculous in the quiet room. Dorothy turned to me, confusion clouding her features. I smiled serenely. Men and their vanity, I said with a light laugh. They'll spend a fortune chasing youth, won't they? Frank avoided my gaze. Dorothy didn't laugh. We sat around her antique table, cinnamon rolls steaming between us, and for a moment, no one spoke. The silence had texture thick, brittle, waiting to break. I took a bite of my roll, savoring the sweetness, and said conversationally, So, this exciting news, Dorothy hesitated. It's actually, maybe now isn't the best time. Frank doesn't look well. I'm fine, he insisted, though his hand twitched toward his hat again. Dorothy leaned closer, concern wrinkling her forehead. When did this start? Have you seen a doctor? It's stress, Frank muttered, staring into his coffee cup. Stress. Dorothy's voice wavered. What kind of stress? I set down my fork, folding my hands neatly. He's been under a lot lately, I said, but I'm touched by how concerned you are. Dorothy, you seem awfully worried about Frank's well-being. Her eyes darted up to mine, wide and wet. He's our friend. Margaret. Of course I care. Of course, I said softly, letting my gaze linger. Frank was just telling me yesterday how much he values your friendship. His fork clattered against the plate, coffee sloshing over the rim of his cup. Yes, he mumbled. Dorothy's been supportive. Supportive, I repeated, tasting the word like it was something exotic. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Dorothy set her cup down too hard. A crack appeared along the handle. Margaret, "What are you doing?" she whispered. "Having brunch," I said lightly. "With my dearest friend and my boyfriend." I looked directly at her. "Though I have to say, Dorothy, your new hair is stunning. When did you decide to go blonde?" Her lips parted, her voice trembling. "About a month ago." "A month?" I mused. Funny timing. Frank's been coming home from golf every Tuesday looking so refreshed, happier, even. Also, about a month ago. The silence after that was a living thing, pulsing in the air between us. Frank's hands shook as he dabbed at his mouth with a napkin. Dorothy's face went pale, her shoulders curling inward as though she could fold herself out of sight. "You know," I said, my tone bright, but my words razor sharp. "I found the most fascinating thing in my shower drain last week. A long blonde hair, not mine, of course." Dorothy's breath hitched. "Sometimes," I continued, rising from my chair, "these old houses cling to secrets, hair, fingerprints, traces of betrayal. It's amazing what surfaces when you start looking closely." I walked around the table and laid a hand on her shoulder. She flinched like I'd burned her. "After 40 years of friendship, Dorothy." I would have expected honesty from both of you. Frank looked like a man caught in a slow-motion disaster, his mouth working but no sound coming out. "Margaret, please." "No," I said, my voice suddenly calm again. "You've both said enough." I picked up my purse and smoothed my skirt. "Enjoy your brunch. Whatever news you had, I'm sure it'll be enlightening." I walked to the door, sunlight spilling across the floor like a stage spotlight. Behind me, I heard Dorothy begin to cry, and Frank whispering my name like an apology too late to matter, but I didn't turn around. I stepped into the morning air and closed the door gently behind me. The performance was over. Phase 2 was complete. Frank caught up to me 3 blocks from Dorothy's house, his footsteps uneven on the pavement, his baseball cap crooked, the thin patches on his scalp glinting under the midday sun. "Margaret," he panted, "please let me explain." I didn't slow down. I'd walked beside this man through park trails and grocery aisles, held his hand at funerals, poured his coffee at 7 a.m., and somehow I had missed every warning sign. Now, with each step, I felt the truth settling into me like frost. "Explain what?" "Frank," I said quietly, "how you managed to use my shower to wash away another woman's perfume, or how you thought I'd never notice." He moved in front of me, desperation cutting through his embarrassment. "It's not what you think." "Oh," he began, his voice trembling. "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I said, stopping so abruptly he nearly stumbled into me. "How long?" "Frank, how long have you been lying to me?" His hand rose to his thinning hair, a nervous tick he couldn't control now that there was barely enough left to touch. "The hair, that shampoo." "You did this hair removal cream," I said calmly. "Industrial strength. Effective, isn't it?" His face drained of color. "You could have caused permanent damage." I tilted my head, watching him the way one studies a faint star detached. Curious. "And you," I replied, "could have caused permanent damage to my trust. I'd say we're even." He reached for my arm, his voice cracking. "Margaret, I love you. Please. It's not like that with Dorothy." "It just happened." I met his gaze steadily. "Frank, we're not 22. Nothing just happens at our age. Every choice is deliberate. Every lie rehearsed. You don't understand." He pleaded. "She was lonely. Margaret. I was only trying to help her." I almost laughed, but it came out as a sigh. "How noble of you!" The widower turned savior. "Tell me, Frank, how many lonely women have you rescued over the years?" His eyes flickered with guilt, and that flicker was answer enough. "There were others," I said. "Weren't there?" He hesitated, then looked away. There have been others." For a moment, I felt the world tilt, not with shock, but confirmation. Betrayal rarely surprises. It simply reveals what you already feared. Finally, I said softly, honesty. I stepped around him and continued walking. His voice followed, fragile, breaking against the quiet street. Where are you going, home? I answered. To pack your things. They'll be on the porch by 6 p.m. I didn't turn around. When I finally glanced back at the corner, he was still standing there alone, small, his scalp catching the light like some cruel halo of truth. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt free. The kind of freedom that tastes like ashes at first because you've waited too long to claim it. 2 hours later, there was a knock at my door. Dorothy stood there, her blonde hair disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed, the color of regret. She didn't wait for an invitation. "Margaret, please," she said through the screen. "We need to talk." I opened the door and gestured toward the living room. "You're just in time for tea," I said. "I always make it stronger when forgiveness isn't on the menu." She hesitated at the threshold, then followed me inside like someone stepping into confession. I poured her tea into the good china, the set I only used when I wanted someone to know they'd disappointed me deeply. "How long?" I asked. No preamble, no softness. 6 weeks, she whispered, eyes fixed on the cup in her hands. "Right around the time you went blonde," I said. She winced. "Margaret, you have to understand. I understand perfectly." I interrupted. "You were lonely," he was bored, "and somewhere between sympathy and self-pity, you convinced yourselves it was love. It wasn't like that." She protested, tears welling. "Then tell me," I said, folding my hands. "Tell me what it was like." Her voice broke. We ran into each other at the grocery store. I'd just finalized the divorce. I was having a panic attack. Frank found me in the cereal aisle, crying. He helped me to the car, took me for coffee. One thing led to another. She covered her face. He said you two had settled into a routine, that the spark was gone. The words landed like pebbles against stone small. But they echoed. "So," I said quietly, "you decided to provide the spark." She looked up, guilt raw in her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear I didn't. You didn't mean to get caught." I corrected. "There's a difference." Dorothy sobbed openly then, the kind of tears meant to invite pity. But all I felt was distance, 40 years of friendship folding into something unrecognizable. "Have I ever lied to you?" "Dorothy, no." "Have I ever taken something that was yours?" "No." "Then help me understand why you thought you could take mine." She couldn't answer. There's no logic to betrayal. It's selfishness disguised as emotion. And it always ends the same way with someone crying and someone done crying. She left an hour later. No forgiveness, no promises, just silence, trailing after her like perfume from my window. I watched her sit in her car, her head bent over her phone. She was probably calling Frank. The two of them deserved each other. I'd given them both the same choice, truth or absence, and both had chosen self-preservation. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I picked up the phone and dialed my lawyer. "Richard," I said. When he answered, "I need to amend my will." His voice was gentle. "What changes are you considering?" I looked around the house, the furniture Robert and I had chosen together, the memories layered in every picture frame. "I want to remove Dorothy Stevens as my executor and beneficiary." He paused. "May I ask why breach of trust?" I said simply. "And I'd like to donate everything to the widow support group at the senior center. Every penny." "That's quite generous," he said. "It's quite necessary," I replied. Those women deserve better than what they're getting. After hanging up, I poured myself a glass of the good wine, the one Frank had been saving for a special occasion. I smiled faintly at the irony. Tonight qualified. The glass caught the lamplight, deep red and warm. For the first time in months, the house was quiet in the right way. I raised the glass slightly, whispering to the empty room, to honesty, hard-earned and overdue. 3 nights passed before Frank returned. I heard his hesitant knock around 7 p.m., soft, almost apologetic. When I opened the door, he stood there holding a grocery store bouquet carnations and baby's breath and a look of defeat that clung to him more tightly than his jacket. His hair, or what was left of it, looked pitiful. Wisps clung in uneven patches, the rest a barren landscape of regret. "I look ridiculous," he said quietly. I stepped aside. "You do." I agreed. "Calm as the evening breeze," he sighed, rubbing his scalp. "The barber said it might never grow back properly. Something about chemical damage to the follicles." "That's unfortunate," I said. "Maybe next time you'll read the label." He followed me to the porch swing. The air between us weighted with unspoken history. "You don't feel guilty at all, do you?" he asked. I turned to face him fully. "Should I?" "You permanently damaged my trust. I temporarily damaged your hairline. I think we're even." His voice cracked. "Margaret, I made a mistake." I shook my head. "You made a choice. There has to be something I can do to fix this." I studied him for a long moment, the man I had once loved or thought I did sitting small in the shadow of his own actions. "Tell me about the others," I said. His eyes darted away. "What others?" "You told me there were 3, including Dorothy. Who were the rest?" He hesitated, then exhaled. "Helen Morrison, she was newly divorced, needed help with her garden. And Susan Wright, before you. She was going through a rough time. I felt the ache rise, but I held it in place like a surgeon holding steady hands over a wound." "How long with Susan?" 2 years. My jaw tightened. "So while you were courting me, you were still with her?" "It wasn't like that," he stammered. "Then what was it like?" Frank explained how sleeping with 2 women isn't exactly like that. He looked at his hands, defeated. "You deserve better than me." "Yes," I said simply. "I do." When he finally stood to leave, he reached for my hand but thought better of it. He walked down the steps slowly, his figure fading into the dusk. I didn't call after him. I didn't need to. He was walking toward his consequences, and I was already walking out of mine. 6 months later, I sat across from my real estate agent, signing the final papers to sell my house. "Congratulations, Mrs. Walsh," Linda said, sliding the documents back to me. "Cash offer, no contingencies. Quite the profit." I smiled faintly. Life has a way of appreciating once you clear out the clutter. "So where are you headed next?" she asked. "Europe," I said. "A cruise the Mediterranean, maybe the Baltic. I've always wanted to see the Northern Lights," she grinned. "Sounds like freedom." "It is," I said, for the first time in a long time. The door chimed as it opened, and I looked up to see Dorothy standing there. Her hair had grown out, the blonde giving way to tired gray. "Margaret," she said softly, "I heard you were selling." "I am," I replied, tucking the papers into my purse. "How are you, Dorothy?" She looked thinner, smaller somehow. "Frank's in the hospital," she said without preamble. "Prostate surgery, he's been asking for you." I straightened my jacket. "I'm sure he has. He's scared." "Margaret, he doesn't have anyone. No family, no real friends." "He has you," I said evenly. She shook her head. "We ended things months ago. We tried to make it work after that day at my house, but the guilt, it ruined everything." "How unfortunate," I murmured. Her eyes filled. "Don't you care at all? After 3 years together?" I looked at her for a long moment, this woman who had once been my sister in all but blood. "Do you know what I've learned in the last 6 months? Dorothy." She swallowed hard. "What?" "That caring about people who don't respect you is the fastest way to disappear from your own life." Her lip trembled. "I spent 40 years caring about you," I continued quietly. 3 years caring about Frank. 68 years caring about everyone else's comfort. And now, I smiled, adjusting my purse strap. Now I care about me. I walked past her into the cool autumn air. Behind me, the office bell chimed again, and the sound felt like the end of a long, painful song. 3 days later, my ship waited in Boston Harbor white against the steel blue sea, its decks gleaming under a sky that promised new beginnings. My cabin overlooked the water, a single bed, a desk, a window big enough for the horizon. Before boarding, I took one last drive through town. The senior center where I'd met Frank came into view, its windows glowing with the warmth of an afternoon book club inside. Women laughed, their faces bright with stories and hope, new faces, new chances. For a moment, I parked the car and watched them, remembering the woman I'd been 3 years ago, hopeful, trusting, maybe a little foolish. She wasn't gone. Not really. She had just learned the cost of her own kindness. My phone buzzed a message from the cruise line final boarding instructions attached. Bon voyage. I smiled and turned the key in the ignition. Behind me lay a lifetime of compromise. Ahead lay oceans I'd never seen, and a version of myself I'd almost forgotten existed. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't hair removal cream or even poetic justice. It was peace. It was the quiet joy of reclaiming your life, one deliberate choice at a time. I parked, handed my ticket to the attendant, and walked up the gangway. The sea breeze caught my hair, silver and untamed. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in 16 years, I wasn't leaving someone, I was simply choosing myself. Thank you for listening to my story. If it moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what's the moment you realized you deserved better? Your story might help someone else find their courage too.